leading this forum. And personally thank him. He was some of you were not at our business meeting today. He was the former president for the past 2 years before I became president for this past year, and was very helpful, not only during the year in kind of getting me into the groove of things, but also at our business meeting. Those of you who weren't here, we had a real tight schedule between the time we had the conference beforehand and then had to come up and make the presentation. So Tim took care of all these slides, getting them together for us. But he's been Greg is a son of Jack Higgins, who's an A Company of 346. His daughter is also one of our members, conducted our chapel service and our memorial service, and is going to be our secretary for this year. So Tim, thanks again, and take it away.
Great, thank you, John. I did want to start with an opening comment. We do try to learn from our veterans. So in the words of Tom Burgess, we're going to start on time. Okay, for this session this afternoon, we're taking a look at what do we really want to have as our, I'll say, closing forum, as we've had topics over these last number of years, looking at the different units, the very rich history of the 87. And a real common thread that has come out, comments from veterans, from their families, their sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, and their grandchildren has been, they really want to hear your story. So that's going to be our theme today. And actually, any kind of luck, as you folks will be doing most of the talking, I'm going to be asking more questions. But they really do want to hear from us today. So it'll be a little bit different perspective. With these slides, I'm not presenting information. You'll see the slides are various questions to get that discussion going. For sons, daughters, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, you'll see as we go through here, a little bit of a homework assignment as we're going throughout the day, so I'll warn you. We're going to get to a couple screens where you're going to have an opportunity to ask our veterans, what would you like to know from these folks while we're gathered here this afternoon? So a little different twist on that. So basically, we're going to start out just talking about what were you doing prior to joining the 87th, and some questions around that yourselves, your siblings, your families, because that's been an interesting part of the table talk that we've heard over the last number of years and during the forums. I would like to get some insights into your experience, both stateside and abroad. Nothing is repetitive. A neat thing we have this year is we have the largest number of new attendees than we've had for, I don't know, can't tell, quite a number of years. And they want to hear what you have to say. So I'll prompt some questions, but we're not limited to that. You're going to want to get some insights on what you experienced when coming home. And certainly an important part of this rich legacy, Acornettes, got some questions for you too. What was your perspective in your very important role with the 87? Then we'll have sons and daughters some questions. And we closing up later in the session this afternoon, going to ask yourselves, veterans, what would you like to share with the next generation? Because this is a good opportunity to do that. So kind of just frame up where we're going with this. But once I get started, it'll probably ramble and who knows where we're going to go. So with that, Dennis is going to help us out. He's going to go around with the microphone. So please do wait to get the microphone so everybody can hear you. A couple folks did ask me before we got started if we would be video recording this. And actually Josh, the tallest guy in the room, we're very close to it. He can get a camera way up there, and he will be video recording that. And by the end of next week, 7-10 days thereabouts, you'll be able to also view that on our website and have that video to download or view or whatever you'd like with that. So with that, I'm going to start out with veterans. What were you doing? I realize many was high school. What were you doing prior to joining the 87th Infantry? Okay, wait for the microphone, please. Thank you. And you don't have to stand, but if you can, that would be nice as well.
Yeah, I'd rather stand. Number one is I was in high school, and I was not doing very well, and I had to sign up for the draft when you turned 18, which I did. And just a few months later, I got a call that they wanted me to come in. I tried my best to join the Air Force, but of course I didn't have a high school education and I couldn't join the Air Force. So naturally I was drafted right out of high school, or rather out of school into the military. I took my basic training in Camp Landing, Florida, and 13 weeks later I was overseas. And so I was fortunate enough to join the 87. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I was never allowed to have a gun in my life, not even a BB gun. So consequently, here I am learning to shoot M1s. But fortunately, what I did was I didn't realize, even though I had never had a gun, I did my best to be a good sharpshooter. And I remember Maggie's flag that when I'd miss it, do this. And I said, well, I don't want that to happen. So consequently, I was a rifleman in the military. And I blessed all that didn't come back, but I was fortunate to make it through. And what an experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Charles McFinnis. I was an Air Cadet, and I volunteered in the Air Corps. And I was in Miami, incredible place, December 43. And I passed all the tests, and I was going to be a hotshot pilot. It turns out the last test, the psychomotor test, which is something like doing this on your head, you just somebody your head, no sweat. And I began the process in this last test, psychomotor. I knew I was going to flunk. There was a time limit on it. Something told me not to become a pilot. And it didn't happen. So I'm transferred to a bomber base in Powell, Texas, became part of the gun camera crew. But in December of 44, I was a battalion commander in ROTC in Atlanta, Georgia. I can read maps, all the stuff I learned. I went straight to U.S. Infantry, which is not too good, but it was one of it time. And I do not regret at all the fact that I was inducted as a replacement. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for accepting me and my book. I appreciate it very much.
I'll give you the fun part. I went to a technical high school, and while there, I had qualified for the Army Specialized Training Program, took their test. Okay, when I reached my 18th birthday, I got my greetings, and still wet behind the ears. On Armistice Day, November 11th, I got on the train, said goodbye to Mom, and went for my induction. Well, I went to Camp Upton on Long Island. It's kind of a familiar place. And they said, if you're there at least 3 weeks, you can get a weekend pass home. So on day 20, I went and applied for my pass. Sorry, you're shipping out tomorrow. And all right, down to Fort Benning. And for the ASTP, a prerequisite was the regular infantry basic training. Just, the time we finished our basic training, all of us, we were all assigned our colleges to train for being engineers. But before we went to college, the government canceled the program. So you were trained as an infantryman. Guess what? Fort Jackson was the next stop.
I was at the University of Chicago. I managed to get one year before I joined the ASTP. But, in that year, I had high school. I was on the rifle team, and then I was on the rifle team at the university. And so they took a bunch of us who were on the rifle team at Chicago. We went under the basement of Stagg Field, of course, where they're working on the atomic bomb at the other end of Stagg Field. But we were down there teaching Air Force cadets and V-12 people how to shoot a rifle. Which end you put on your shoulder, and which end you point at someone. So that was a kind of an interesting way to get started. But then I might say, they sent us to University of Wisconsin for ASTP, managed to get through one semester there before we decided to close the program down. But the people who failed halfway through the quarter at Wisconsin, they got sent to Army Intelligence.
Enough said.
Those of us who passed went along to Fort Benning for basic.
I hate talking to you, but my background is Greek. My parents came from Greece in 1902. My grandmother was the most richest person I knew in my whole life. And they did not want me to be in the service. But because I had to go, and I wouldn't mind not going, but I went anyway. But they cannot believe the fact that some kid, 18 years old, was going to be in the Army, the Navy, etc. And I'll never forget that my mother and my two sisters came to Fort Meade before we shipped out. First thing I said, Charlie, you sure got fat. Well, I gained several pounds. I was hard as a rock. And then never forget that I left this country and then realized the fact that for once, this brother, son of theirs, was going to be in good hands, and the good Lord helped me so many times. Thank you. Let me talk.
Did any of you have siblings that were in the service during the same time you were?
I had an older brother, Charles was his name, and unfortunately he was injured in the basic training, as a matter of fact. And he got, later on, was medically treated and had to be relieved from the service. And unfortunately he had to come home, and later on my mother and father had to take him under their wing and treat him. And consequently, my father became very ill, and so then I was in law school at that time, and had to come home and help him and the family with the job that he wished he'd had. But it was a sad situation, but regardless of that, the rest of us made it fine. Thank you all so much.
I was the oldest of three boys. And there were four of us all together. And my second brother, I was the oldest. My second brother was drafted in March of '44. He went to the 103rd Infantry Division and was in the weapons platoon of Company E, I believe it is. I don't remember what regiment. Anyway, they participated in the invasion of southern France, and he was wounded rather seriously in the leg in the Vosges Mountains in the early part of that southern France campaign.
Okay, shift gears. What was the, oh, I'm sorry.
I'll just speak for my dad, DJ. He had an older brother, they called him Sonny, and he was in the Army Air Corps. And he would come, I remember as children, we'd be visiting my grandparents, and we'd be at his house, and he would tell stories of him being up in the airplane. I believe he was the navigator or something like that. But he was older than Dad, and they were in different divisions, different parts of the service, but that's my uncle.
Shifting gears. In your time in the 87th, what was the funniest thing that you had or experienced?
Yeah, go ahead, man, but this is really funny. One of my guys who was a professional pipe smoker, he had about 10 merchant pipes. He babied them, he loved them. You could not talk about his pipes. He ordered his tobacco from Chicago, especially blended for him. So what I did, I swept the floor, got all of the stuff that was there, hairs and ditches, etc. I got some pencils, I ground up the rubber pencil, and put it in this beautifully round, wonderful, fantastic, custom-made tobacco. This guy sat there, and he smoked every bit of it, and it was, you know, rubber and bird would bubble. Bubbling all the time, etc. He smoked the whole damn thing. He also never took a bath. True. He literally stunk. We got him one time, he put it in the shower, and he washed his butt. Thank you.
Me again. After landing in Bahar, I was in an advanced group going across France all the way to Metz. Now, when we got to Metz, they had forts. Germans still had forts that were active up on the tops of the hills overlooking the town. Well, the small group of us took over what may have been an officer's candidate school, German officer's candidate school or something, attached to a little church. Of course, the church had no roof on it. Everything was demolished down there. But anyway, we kind of had the freedom of the place. We had a hearth, would be the smithy's hearth. We made a nice fire in there, stayed warm and everything else. And there was somebody, I guess, knew how to play the organ. It was a foot-operated organ. We climbed up over there and got the thing working, and we were playing some hymns and so on, and this and that. Then we got down there and back to our own quarters until the rest of the outfit came over to join us over there. The first thing we know, they said, "Put out those fires. Don't you know those forts are still in German hands up on the top over there?" Oh, they stopped all our fun.
John McCall, 347. One of my best friends was born in Italy, up in San Donato, Italy. And he came over here in 1935 because his father did not want him to go to school under the fascist system, under Mussolini. So he came over and lived in Malden, Massachusetts. And he got a job working on the street, but finally he went to welding school because in Quincy, Mass. Is where they make the battleships, aircraft carriers and such. And he became a welder. Pretty soon the government no longer needed ships, they needed infantry. So he got drafted at the same time as I did, and we trained at Camp Wheeler. Well, we went overseas together and all that. And as you men know, every night they have a password. It's changed every night throughout the whole system, so everybody would know what's going on. And the password could be Atlanta, and the guy down here says Georgia, so you know you're on the same team. So Danny had a broken Italian language. He went out of the area one day, night. Well, he was coming back in, and the password was Pittsburgh Pirates. So he was coming in, and the guy challenged him, and he couldn't say Pittsburgh. He was saying Pittsburgh. So the guy says, "Go down there and bring that man up here." He brought him up. "What's your name?" Marini. "What company?" "Emma Company." I mean, what? "Sergeant, call up M Company, see who this guy is." So they called him up, and he says, "Oh, he's okay. That's Danny Marini."
Crossing the Rhine. How many of you dumped out your water and filled your 5-gallon water cans with wine? You can't be the only one. No more secrets, guys. You can open up now. What we did we did that. We have a short little Mortimer from Brooklyn, New York. And Mortimer had way too much of that stuff. And so we laid Mortimer out in the cemetery, right below a cross. When Mortimer came to the next day, he thought he'd gone on.
The funniest thing that I ever had while we were overseas, Company A, when we were in England, was in a little town of Biddle, England. And the locals were delightful to us. And I and another sergeant had been invited by a local family to come and have dinner with them on Sunday evening. And we got up Sunday morning and we didn't have anything to do. So the two of us caught a series of buses from one little English village to another over to Manchester, which was about, maybe 22 miles away. And we caught the same set of buses to get back to Biddle in time to go to this family for dinner that evening. And when we got into the family, the gentleman of the family said, well, what have you lads been doing today? And we said, well, we've been to Manchester. And his jaw dropped and he said, you've been to Manchester? And we said, well, yes. He said, I haven't been to Manchester in 20 years. And I laughed and said, well, you know, from the little town I'm from in Florida, it's 25 miles to the next town. And he said, what's between the towns? And I said, well, it's nothing. It's just, palmettos and pine trees. He said, what do they do with the land? I said, well, nothing, a few cows on it. And this Britisher could not understand the vastness of America. And that to me was one of the funniest experiences I ever had while we were overseas.
Well, it takes me a little while to get on my feet at 91, but I heard so many good tales, I just thought I'd get up and try to give a few things too. Am I okay now with that? Thank you. I've got 10 people here. Most of them are out of my family, so I hope I do this right. But you were talking about what you do before you went into to the Army. I grew up in southern Oklahoma. I kind of a typical Okie. I kind of enjoyed life, went to church. Fact is, I went to church a lot. My father was the son of a minister, and my grandfather was that Methodist minister in North Texas and southern Oklahoma. So I pretty well was growing up with an attitude I might not even want to fire a rifle, or I certainly didn't want to kill anybody. But my church education stayed with me, and I was a good student. In fact, I had to be, and so did my sisters. One, I was the only boy, called Sonny Boy. And my sisters were very nice to me, and they also did well. And I don't tell about all of that good stuff. But then I went on, after getting some good grades and so forth in high school, I went on to college, and I found out that nearby in the Chickasaw Nation, we had a junior college and had a good reputation, and it was cheap. So I started there, got a job as an assistant to the professor of chemistry. And there I did okay, but the wars were coming, and I was beginning to wonder how I would stand if I had to join the service. But of course, I was a 100% patriotic young man, and my church says, you know, do what you should do about things. And I worried about that, but by the time I finished this little college, which was junior college, I made up my mind that Hitler had to go. Or some of them had to go, any all that evil. So I finished there in early 1942 and went on in the summer session to the University of Oklahoma, which ultimately I graduated from, but it took me 10 years. First, though, after the president of the university said that any of us who wanted to join the service and fight Hitler and others, I would be credited with all the school work I'd done. I wouldn't lose anything. In fact, is everything I was taking, I'd be credited with it for that semester.
Thank you for sharing that.
As for a funny story, it reminds me, didn't actually happen to me, it happened to a friend of mine in the company. He was on a patrol with several other soldiers, and it was getting dusk, and they stumbled. And part of one of the members of the patrol was a guy who had been born in Austria and emigrated to America and had never lost his accent. They stumbled on a bivouac of British soldiers in dusk, and British soldiers raised their guns, and this Austrian guy howls out, "Don't shoot! We are American soldiers." Fortunately, one of the other guys interceded and stopped any further proceedings.
Tell you what, Tom told us the other night. He's talking to the paratrooper. He asked him how long he's been in the airborne. Over 8 years. So I said, how many jumps you made? He said, I haven't made any. I said, I don't understand. Paratrooper, 8 years, you hadn't made any. He said, yes, sir. I've been pushed out many times, but I've never jumped.
We see these movies, World War II movies, there's always some good-looking Italian kid there with black hair, and he's always funny. We had one in our company. His name was Tony Barbuto. We called him Barbuti because he hated the stink, like we all stunk. He went to somebody's house, he drew it around, found some perfume, and he stunk like perfume. It was terrible. He could see him smelling miles away, so were the Germans. Now, our top sergeant was a tough SOB, Hiss, 6'4" from South Carolina. He hated Yankees. Really hated Barbuto. So one day we were together and he said, "Where's that son of a bitch, Barbuto?" Sorry, son, we don't know. But he had been in the house Barbuto was getting some perfume. And he got a return something like so short. This guy's 6'4". "Come here, you son of a bitch, come here." "Yes, sir, sergeant." He said he chewed him out for about 10 minutes. Chewed him. He said like that. "Wait a second, Barbuto, wait a second." He said, "Kiss me, sergeant." Kiss me, sergeant, and kissed him. And that's fun to me.
How many of you remember a veteran by the name of Don Hill? You remember Don? He was on the executive board of the association. He was a General Motors dealer in Ohio, and he was the funniest guy. He could tell story after story. But I do remember one. How many of you brought back a souvenir? Yeah, probably something not too big, like maybe a bayonet or handgun, or something that you could get in your pocket, probably hide, okay? Well, Don, he told us about the time that he thought he needed a typewriter. So he picks up this typewriter, and he said, I'm carrying it around, He said, finally, after some point, he said, I just couldn't carry that typewriter along anymore, and I just figured I just didn't need that typewriter very badly, so I ditched it. But I'm thinking, here you're trying to deal with the war, and you're trying to carry a typewriter around.
Well, I had a funny experience when I was in Koblenz, and one thing, I found a top hat, and it's a kind that you fold up. So I took that and I folded up my field jacket, and then I slid it in. Whenever I met a GI or anybody, I'd take it out, get the rim, and I found that on and put that in. Well, later, I got on a roving patrol, and I was in B Company, 345th, and we went down to A Company that was in a hospital, and we went around C Company that was in a brewery, and we thought we had an aid there. But they said, no, all the beer was gone, and we tried to get some, but there wasn't. But there was a truck out in front, and it was loaded with something. So we couldn't tell what it was. And I found out later from the guys that was there in the C Company, they had that full of beer. And we left, when we left, we went and we walked up over the top of it. We was up on the airport up there. And then we walked up that hill, exposed to the Germans on the other side of the Rhine there. And when we cleared that and got out of there, we heard some artillery coming in, and the Germans blew up that truck with all that beer in there. But we went on across, and it was getting towards late in the evening, and they come up, and they brought up a hot shower. And so we was on the tail end of it, until I come up there, and they had this, remember that powdered milk that they had? And most of it wasn't dissolved, and it looked almost like cottage cheeses, all that little pieces of dissolved powder. I put that in the canteen, and then I went to the next guy and got a piece of meat of some kind, and then I had some potatoes, dehydrated potatoes, and then I went to the next guy, and he had some browns up there, and I said, well, what's that? He said, well, do you want it or don't you? And I said, okay. I thought it was gravy. I said, dump it on my potatoes. And so then we went from there. They had dug a pit, and it was quite deep. It was probably down in there, I would say maybe 15 feet. And it seemed to be probably about, maybe 25 feet wide and about 40 feet long. And they had a metal roof over it. And then we went down in there, and I found out that brown stuff that they put on the potatoes was chalk. But it was all hot, and it tasted good. So then later, the Germans started shelling us, and the shrapnel was coming down through that. There was corrugated steel. And there was big bundles. I mean, they were seemed to be about 2.5 feet square cubes full of toilet paper. So when they shelling started, we buried ourselves underneath all those big bundles of toilet paper. We figured it would kind of maybe slow some of the shrapnel down. And it was all over. We got out of it all right.
I wanted to just say this, I'm not happy with they gave me the maximum, or the oldest soldier here today, and I'm now the oldest soldier here, and I'm not happy with that, for I'd like another one.
What's that WWII? What? Anything? Well, most of you guys were, I don't know, either college graduates or something, or high school. Well, I left home early, you know. I went sailing on the Great Lakes. And while I worked for U.S. Steel, well, let's see, I was 42, 43 or 44. That's when I got drafted. And we went to Fort Benning, not Fort Benning, Campbell, Texas, for our basic training. Well, we were down there 17 weeks. But on the last week, we had to go out on maneuvers and stay there. So, but they had, and we had to sleep in our bunk tents. So, you know, I was a guy that always thought, figured out something. So as we're going out, well, we were supposed to take our pack. Well, I had the pack all right, but I put the, what do you call that, on the bed now? The sheet? Wasn't the sheet? Mattress cover. I took that along with a pillow and wrapped it up. Nobody knew the difference. So we got out where we were supposed to be. We got in our pup tents. I filled the goddamn mattress cover with leaves. There I am, nice, soft, in the pillow. And well, nobody knew about it until my friend from Detroit. But it's so funny. Everybody else is moaning and groaning. Anyway, it rained. Well, in the meantime, before we went out there, we went on a weekend over the weekend. And we went to Austin, Texas, for a week. Well, you know how it is when you get a hold of too much fire water. But anyway, we were in a taxi cab. The guy was the other kid was in the back end with a woman, and we were going down the road, and she let me out. So the kid says, "Well, I'll walk you home." Next thing you know, he comes running back to the cab, and the cab took off, and so he stopped, and me and my children got out, and my friend sitting in the middle took the goddamn cheese for the cab. And he said to me, after we run underneath the vine out there, he says, "What should I do with the keys?" I said, "I don't know, throw them away." Well, anyway, as we went back to Campton, we had to go back, and doggone FBI agents was, yeah.
And who made the most positive impact on you while serving in the 87th?
We have one more back here.
Okay, that's fine.
This story is still in the comedy department. We had approached the German border, and it was an order that anyone had any notes or diaries or anything in that, you must burn them. And if anyone didn't, anyone caught, they'd be court-martialed. So I wanted to keep my diary, but I didn't want to be party to anything that would injure any of my comrades. Well, I burned my diary, but I remembered a lot of it. But anyway, we're in this little village right on the German border, and there was nobody there except an older couple. Now, he was tall and taciturn, he never smiled, and we would ask him things, and he would say, "Nichts verstehen," which of course means I don't understand. And she was short and hair all over her head, and gestured fully with her hands and so forth. And they were a really odd couple. He was very tall, very taciturn. She was short, very demonstrative. And she would say, "Alles kaputt, der Krieg ist kaputt." Everything's broken, the war's over, all that sort of thing. So what do? We call them Nick and Alice. Nick verstehen and Alice kaputt. Yeah. Now, fast forward, we go back to the United States. We have a 30-day furlough. I'm home. My dad says, "Fred, I want you to come with me out to the fairgrounds. There's a horseshoe, and there's a horse show, and I want you to meet some people." So I'm out there, and coming toward us on horseback is a couple. I said to myself, I've met these people before. I know them, but I don't know their name. The man is tall. He's angular. He doesn't have a smile. And on the other horse is this little lady, kind of wide, hair all over her head, demonstrating, calling to my dad, greeting him. My dad calls to me and says, "Fred, I want you to meet Nick and Alice." I laughed so hard I couldn't respond. He said, "Fred, I want you to meet Nick and Alice." Nick says, "What's so damn funny?" I said, "I can't explain it."
Let's try another one. What was the typical food stateside and overseas? Favorite food?
When I was overseas, I didn't see that much fun. The funnest thing I saw was, you remember Sad Sack? Yeah. How many remember Sad Sack? The cartoons. The cartoons. Yeah, it showed one picture of him in the barn, laying on the hay, and the cow standing right up over him and said, "Having breakfast in bed." The second one I remember, he was the war was over, he got on a ship and headed for the United States, and he was a woman's man. He loved women, and you could see him thinking, women, 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 women. Well, they put him on a train in New York, and that train went straight to California and straight to Tokyo. He missed all those women.
What was the dumbest thing you experienced while serving in the 87?
Real quick, I don't know whether it's really the dumbest, but after we took Koblenz, we talk about the wine coming over the river. Some wine bottles appeared, and somebody got one of these great big metal tubs, and they started pouring the wine in there. And some of the guys had some schnapps. They started pouring that in there, and then some of the officers had some whiskey, bourbon, or scotch. We started pouring that in there. And so by the time we got through, we had a nice big tub of mixed drinks. So all of us then lined up with our canteen cups and scooped out, and we slept real good that night.
Max, what were you doing before and while the veterans were in the 87?
My name is Claire Coyne. During World War II, I was a teenager living on a strip of land outside of New York City, a mile from an Army base, Fort Tilden, and across the bay from Floyd Bennett Field, the Naval Air Station. Our home address was posted at both places if a soldier or a sailor wanted some quiet time. And many soldiers came, and all they wanted to do was sit and be left alone. And I showed them where the chairs were. They would sit and open a book, and within 5 minutes, they always fell asleep. I woke them up at the appointed time, and they came in the house, of course, to use the bathroom, etc. And they always went home with a bag of homemade cookies by my mother. My brother was on a ship in the South Pacific. I had a cousin fighting in Italy and another one with the 8th Air Force in England. My mother was a great lady. Twice a week she put on her gray dress and she rode the bus to the local Veterans Hospital where she helped the nurses with the wounded servicemen. My father was the block air raid warden. When it was his turn, he walked his beat all night, making sure everybody's black curtains were closed and no light shone from the house. When it was daybreak, he came home, got ready to go to work for himself. Being a teenager back then was, I guess, a strange, interesting experience because as I got older and met other people, those whose families were affected by it, it wasn't an annoyance, it was a tragedy. But luckily, all the young men in our family came home safe. And my brother was the last to come home, and there was a big celebration, and it was wonderful. When my mother volunteered at the local USO, she would bring me, and I would see that the soldiers and sailors had peanuts and pretzels on the table. I brought them their soda drinks, but if any of them wanted a beer, I would have to find an adult to carry the beer for me. I would bring the adult to the table, and I would say to the young man, I said, here is your beer. And they thought it was so weird that I couldn't carry the beer. I thought it was weird also. But that was my World War II experience.
I wanted to talk about the captain of my battery, Captain Mobley, who was from this area, and his family lives in this area. When he was my captain most of the time, but in March, just as the war was coming to an end, we crossed the Rhine, and and then the Germans were running, and I went back to my battery since things had, see what I was called back. I'm happy. I didn't, there wasn't anything unusual about that. But he said, Glenn, you've been up there a couple of 3 weeks, but we're now in such a shape, your howitzers are out of range. Germans are gone, and we've got to move them up. Now, you've been out your third of the time as a foreign observer, and have you had any hot meals in that time? The answer was, no, haven't at all. He said, well, here, you shouldn't be leaving right now because we have a hot meal down there with the truck right now. So he says, you go there, I'll take your Jeep and your driver and the major from the Fire Direction Center wants to go there while he's got an opportunity to look things over. Well, they did, and I went down for a good hot meal. It seemed like a wonderful thing he did for me. Well, now here's the point. He took that thing to give me a good hot meal, and he took my place, going over there to locate where the Howards would be. They came across a place in the road to the location where a heavy blast had gone by and destroyed the road, and you had two choices to get around, and one was going on a rather rough side next to, not far from the river, and on the other side it was much smoother and it looked pretty good place you could run around. Well, they had to make a decision, but they didn't know where the mines might be. But they concluded that the Germans were running so fast they didn't have any time to do. Okay. Well, they went on that side, and the mine blew them all up. My Jeep, my driver, Captain Mobley, and Major Simon. That was the thing about that. I just kept thinking about the fact that he took my place so I could have some food.
That is
nice.
a great story. Thank you. Okay, as we started out, now it's the children, grandchildren, nieces, and nephews' turn. What would you like to know about your favorite veterans' experience in history?
May seem like an odd curiosity, but I have this interest in fountain pens, and I have a little collection of fountain pens. And what I've noticed over the last couple of years, I've looked at letters that you guys wrote back home. It seems like a lot of you use fountain pens. What's that all about? Were they readily available, or did they give you fountain pens? I mean, you're in the middle of battle and you write with a fountain pen. That doesn't seem like the right match. What was that? Did you all have fountain pens, or was that the writing instrument of choice, or what? But you didn't have pencils, you just had fountain pens? Really? Did you carry fountain pens around in your uniform? Really? You had green ink? Oh, yeah, I like you. That's interesting. Well, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
I'll keep the topic related to gear since I'm a bit of a gear junkie myself. I'm interested. What was the most prized piece of equipment that you were issued? And then what was the least favorite piece of equipment that you were issued? What did you think was really a fantastic piece of equipment, and then what did you think was junk? Was there something prized?
Gas mask was the least.
Gas mask was the least?
Trench shovel was
the M1?
No, trench shovel was the first.
Trench shovel was the worst?
First,
trench shovel was the best? Most important? So, positive votes for the Thompson trench shovel?
DDT, keep the lights on. That's right.
And DDT. Gas mask was bad, anything else? How was your footwear? Did they give you good boots?
No.
Bad?
Gas mask away.
Gas mask out of go washing day before the wedding. Most important part of the wedding, my more.
Talk about how he got his galoshes the day before he went to do combat, but his most important piece of equipment was his mortar. All right, thank you very much.
In the back again.
I want to know about Christmas 1944. I want to know what that Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, what you remember from that 1944.
Christmas Day, 1944, I left southern France in an open truck with most of the other platoon, heading up for the Bulge. We got up for the noon meal. We unloaded. The cooks had prepared a full-course dinner, hot dinner, from where we left till we got up there to eat. Looking up in the sky, it was full of vapor trails. The Air Force had been shut down for some time, and they just released them to get up and start clearing the enemy out, bombing. But that meal was the most delightful thing that I can never remember. Having a full-course dinner, hot, on Christmas Day.
Well, we heard a lot of great things about our trip to Fort Benning, and we'd like to get your insights. What kind of memories were rekindled with the visit? How'd you find it?
One thing at Fort Benning, when we got there, I was looking for Fort Benning. I never did find it. Because I never found anything that looked like the area where I served basic training. All I know was we had a little hut with a little potbelly stove in that had to be put out at night. This was wintertime, 43. And there was a sign on the front door where you would go in. This hut burns in 15 minutes. Whoops.
Just 2 words, the old barracks.
Thank you. Any other? Okay. Well, for our forum this afternoon, obviously the questions have taken us a lot of different directions, but there is a common thread. For those here who are not veterans, how did you enjoy the stories?
Just a little, very short one.
That's right.
The veterans here, I don't know how many took the honor flight to Washington. I did a couple of years ago. It wasn't the World War II memorial that impressed me. But from the moment I left house in the morning until we returned at home, that trip itself was probably one of the most emotional times I ever spent as a veteran.
Okay. As we wrap things up, thanks, Barney, for sharing that. Hate to use the title homework, but the common thread is you all have a story. And your sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, they really want to hear those. You've heard the pleas from Mark and Barbara for the GAN, and most importantly for your own families, but to capture those stories. And the reason we use this approach today is it's a pretty broad topic. If you ask somebody, tell me about your time in World War II. That's pretty broad, because their experiences were vast, they were many, and they were very rich. But would encourage, select a topic or two, spend some time discussing it, and write it down. Submit it to the GAN, write it for your own family history. But would encourage, take that step, because if we take it in small questions, some really nice dialogue comes out. So that was our common thread for our workshop today. Share that with the family, and hopefully we'll have more information we can share in the GAN. For the grandchildren, your attendance here is probably the best gift you can give your veteran. Thank you.